Imola is the center of attention. McLaren leads while Ferrari struggles to keep up. And it does so right in the home race, with water at the throat and a future to rewrite. The SF25 has shown promise but also significant setbacks. Leclerc remains confident while Hamilton faces pressure. And meanwhile, Verstappen dreams of the big hit with a Red Bull still far from perfection. In this video, we analyze the exact point where Ferrari lost the thread and what could change it. And no, it's not just a technical issue, it's a showdown that starts from the track and goes all the way to the management. Stay with me as we put the pieces together. If you enjoy the videos, hit like to support me. Let's get started right away. After races in Asia and America, the Formula One World Championship returns to Europe with a stop that is special for many. Imola, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, is the first European event of 2025 and also one of the most anticipated, especially for Italian fans, since it is run just a few kilometers from Maranello, home of Ferrari. The weekend will be full of expectations, not only for the home value of the event, but also because many teams will bring important update packages to the track. Everyone is chasing McLaren, which has dominated the start of the season with the MCL39. Verstappen hopes that his Red Bull can get closer, but Ferrari is also called for a concrete response after fluctuating results. At Ferrari, the need to do well in front of their own fans is very strong. Leclerc is more motivated than ever, and Hamilton hopes to finally find a straightforward weekend after a series of difficult appointments. The SF25 has shown potential, but so far only in flashes, and it is precisely at Imola that the team aims to turn the page. At the start of this season, there has often been talk of the potential of the SF25, a term continuously used by Frederick Vasseur. So far, that potential has only been seen in fits and starts, and it is mainly the drivers, primarily Leclerc, who are trying to bring it out of a single-seater still hampered by structural problems, particularly at the rear. The technical department is looking for solutions, but the times are long, and there are still no numerical certainties on which to build a decisive update, such as a new suspension. This complicates the situation. On the contrary, in Maranello, they still believe that there is room to reverse the course. However, the Miami weekend represented a real low point. The initial setup was wrong, and the changes made only worsened the situation. The ideal usage window of the car was never found. Only during the sprint qualifying, by slightly lowering the setup, were we able to recover some aerodynamic load. After the sprint though, new modifications required raising the car, sacrificing performance in slow speed. Always the weak link of the Ferrari 2025. An alarming signal also arrived during the qualifications. Hamilton in Q2 was not able to improve with new tires, an anomaly that alerted the team. Leclerc reversed strategy in Q3 using new tires first and used tires second to compensate. And even if the first lap was aborted, the second was better. Another negative data came from the sprint quali, where Ferrari was the one that gained the least in the first sector, going from medium to soft, less than 0.3, while McLaren, Mercedes and Red Bull gained from 3.5 to over 4. Managing slow corners remains the key issue. To avoid wear and tear issues and disqualifications like in China, the SF25 is kept higher off the ground and stiffened, but in doing so, it loses a lot of traction. At high speeds though, the car stays competitive. By raising the setup, part of the load is lost, but the stiff suspensions limit the consequences. The base and aerodynamics seem to work, at least in the faster sections, but as soon as you enter the slow sections, everything falls apart. So far, the SF25 has only shown its potential at two moments, Melbourne's Friday and the Shanghai weekend. In Australia, a different car was seen, easier to drive, balanced and precise. The Eclair that was happy. The rear followed the front well. However, between Friday and Saturday, we returned to a stiffer setup to contain wear and tear, and Ferrari lost over half a second in the slow sections and other tenths in the fast ones. In Shanghai, between sprint qualifying and classic qualifying, more than 0.2 were lost in the slow sections, but with a better compromise compared to Australia. However, even there the price paid was high, the disqualification for excessive wear and tear on the bottom of Hamilton's car. In Miami, instead, the loss in the slow between the two qualifications exceeded 0.4. The numbers speak clearly. The SF25 is fragile in non-ideal conditions, but when it is brought into its operating window, which is too narrow for now, it can be a competitive car. If the upcoming updates manage to solve at least part of these limitations, Ferrari could still carve out a positive second half of the season. The world goal is now out of reach, but saving honor and getting back into the fight at the top remains a concrete possibility. At Ferrari, they still believe for now, the central point concerns the origins of the single-seater. Who is the real author? Enrico Cardile, in charge of the technical project until the summer of 2024, left when a good part of the resources were already employed in development. His successor, Loic Serra, who came from Mercedes with a specific technical role, suddenly found himself in charge of the department to fill an internal void. In fact, Serra was hired to coordinate areas such as chassis development and track engineering, but not to lead the entire project. The promotion happened more out of necessity than vision, and the Frenchman inherited an already started job without having the opportunity to fully guide its development. Cardile's departure appears to have had significant consequences, reflecting an unusual recurring issue for Ferrari. A lot of will, but too much confusion. The team seems to want to change, but always clashes with structural obstacles and hasty decisions. And even the best intentions get lost in the internal chaos. Hamilton and Leclerc are trying to team up in a context that is anything but simple. The SF21 was a first sign of recovery after a difficult 2020, but both in 2023 and 2025, the single-seater failed to meet expectations. The SF25 needs deep changes, not just simple updates. A general review of the project is underway, which makes everything much more complicated in a budget cap regime. It's clear that 2025 was never thought of as a transition season, yet we're already forced to think about a nearly completely renewed version of the car. However, all of this is not related to the new technical directive TD018, as some had speculated. And initially it was thought to introduce the innovations at Imola, then it was preferred to postpone them to coincide with the new tests on the front wing. In reality, it's a structural intervention that requires more time than expected. And in the meantime, the championship goes on. 6 races have already been run, and Ferrari has been more of a protagonist for its mistakes than for its results. To make matters worse, the embarrassing double disqualification in China, and a growth trend that never really started, not even on weekends.
Sprint.
Negative signs were already there in the winter tests in Bahrain. Leclerc seems to be used to handling disappointment, while Hamilton, who was looking for a new momentum in Ferrari, found himself in a situation similar to that of Mercedes in recent years. The car does not allow him to express himself, and even the work on the track does not seem to offer him improvements over the weekend. At the moment, the only way to move forward is to put aside personal ambitions and think only of the team's interest. The radio skits between drivers and pits seen in Miami must remain an isolated case. For now, the fight is for backup positions, and in these conditions, unity is needed, not division. Hamilton and Leclerc will have to collaborate as Leclerc and Sainz did in past seasons, making the most of what they have at hand. Also because, data in hand, the teams where Sainz has raced have always grown during his stay. And if Ferrari really wants to get back up, it needs its 2 champions to row in the same direction. Only then can we possibly begin discussing podiums and victories again rather than 7th place finishes. In recent months, the SF25 has lost what were its strengths. Stability in slow curves, traction on exit, and a solid rear end. Everything that worked is now a problem. The choice to revolutionize the car almost completely, changing 99% of the components, is not paying off. The new front end is more effective but can't be fully utilized due to lack of back-end support. The rear is fragile, also due to the decision to continue with the pool suspension.
Rod butt.
It's exaggerated to the point of introducing structural defects. The setup is a nightmare. If you keep the ground clearance higher to avoid excessive wear of the plank, you lose load. If you lower the car to get performance, the risk of disqualification, as happened in China, is real. At the start, the car is higher because of the weight, but with the empty tank, it lowers too much. The result is a precarious balance that the drivers have to manage as best they can. Leclerc is trying to adapt with a slippery rear, while Hamilton is very penalized, unable to find confidence. All these compromises, combined with the rigidity imposed by the suspensions, make the Ferrari ineffective on the curbs and unstable in slow corners. In fact, the SF25 suffers from some of the same problems that had limited the Red Bull RB20 in 2024, problems that are still partly present on the RB21 but now better managed. The balance remains a major weak point and the solutions are not immediate. While Ferrari is struggling, McLaren seems to have inherited the best of what was the Ferrari F175 of 2022. So much aerodynamic load, excellent
Traction, balance.
general balance between front and rear, ability to travel low with soft settings without compromising the wear of the plank. Only Mercedes manages to get close to its efficiency out of the curve, and even if it suffers slightly on the straights, this is not enough to limit its overall competitiveness. That F175 signed by Binotto, Cardil and Sanchez was a bold and initially winning project. The problems came with the introduction of the TD39 directive, and from there reference points were lost. Conversely, McLaren has not erred with an evolutionary package since the 2023 Austrian Grand Prix. Every update has worked. Only in Jeddah in 2025 was an unconfirmed diffuser seen, but it will be interesting to see if it will be reintroduced in Imola. One of the most evident strengths of the MCL39 is tire management. They heat up quickly in qualifying and remain stable in the race, even when the asphalt becomes scorching. This provides consistent performance, and rivals, including Ferrari, can only keep up intermittently. However, the difference is made by consistency, and it is precisely that which creates the gap seen in the race. All this also fuels suspicions, especially at Red Bull, where they are well aware of Rob Marshall's aggressive and creative style. Now, at McLaren, sometimes technical directives really upset the balance, other times they go almost unnoticed. In 2022, a directive brought down Ferrari. It's uncertain if the story will repeat this year with reversed roles. The start of the season for Lewis Hamilton at the helm of Ferrari has been very complicated. The 7-time world champion is still struggling to adapt to the SF25, and the internal comparison with Leclerc is clearly unfavorable, with 5 defeats in qualifying and 6 in the race, with the only exception being the sprint races. Charles has an advantage not only because of his age, but also because of his deep knowledge of the team, with which he has been working for several seasons now. Yet, it was during the sprint in China that Hamilton sent a strong signal. When the car behaved as it should, he started to shine again. It's on this episode that Toto Wolff dwelled to emphasize that Lewis's talent is far from faded. According to Wolff, the dominant performance in Shanghai shows that Hamilton still retains his special touch. For him, it's a pattern. If everything works, if the car is in the right window and Hamilton feels comfortable, then he is still one of the absolute best. Wolff also acknowledged that the switch from Mercedes to Ferrari represents a huge change for Lewis. After 12 years in an environment where everything was tailor-made for him, finding himself in a new team with different methods and a fast teammate like Leclerc is a particularly challenging task, and it's not surprising that there are difficulties at the beginning. It's a normal phase for every driver who changes top teams, and it will take some time to find the right chemistry. Mercedes is among the most consistent teams in this first part of the season. The W16, especially with Russell, has always hit the top 5 both in qualifying and in the race. Even Antonelli, in his first real experience with the team, is growing race after race, helping the team to firmly maintain the second place in the Constructors' Championship. The gap from Red Bull is still manageable, but the real difference is felt compared to McLaren, which at the moment seems unreachable on the race pace. The W16 has shown good potential on the dry lap, but on the long run it suffered more than expected. In an attempt to close this gap, Mercedes has planned a series of updates starting from the Imola Grand Prix. The goal is clear: to improve tire management during the race, optimizing the behavior of the single-seater over longer distances. Imola will be the first European test bench of the season, and as per tradition, the first important development packages will arrive. After carefully observing the car in the first 6 weekends, the team has understood which areas to focus on. The main focus is the rear axle, which has temperature issues. Too much heat negatively affects the grip, forcing the drivers to manage the tires instead of pushing. So far, there have only been 2 minor changes, one in Australia after the winter tests and the other in Miami. In Australia, various elements were touched, including the front suspension, the floor, the engine hood, the air intakes, and the rear wing. In Miami, a new configuration was introduced for the rear wing, designed to increase the load in the central area and reduce the resistance of the ends. The package arriving in Imola should include a revised floor with changes in both the side sidewalks and the diffuser area and new rear air intakes. All these interventions aim at better cooling and more effective temperature management, allowing drivers to attack without the fear of excessively wearing out the tires. The technical objective is clear: increase the load at the rear and improve the efficiency of the rear beam wing system. A better extraction of air from the floor through a wider diffuser should generate a greater pressure difference and therefore more downforce, while keeping the tire in an optimal thermal window. There is also an update planned in the rear brake area, designed to better expel the hot air that accumulates during braking. This should reduce the heat transmitted to the rim and therefore to the tire. In qualifying, it could represent a challenge in bringing the tires up to the right temperature immediately, but in the race, it could make a difference. The next 3 races will be crucial. If the updates do their job, Mercedes can count on a more stable and competitive single-seater even in race management, and maybe manage to close the gap on a McLaren that until now has seemed uncatchable. There is also hope that the new technical directive TD018 coming up can reshuffle the cards a bit. After complicated years, McLaren has returned to the spotlight. 2024 marked the end of a long wait with the conquest of the Constructors' title, which had been missing since 1998. And even in 2025, the Woking team seems to not want to slow down. 5 victories in the first 6 races, dominant performances, and a favorite status that no one in the paddock questions. The superiority shown in Miami has inevitably turned the spotlight on the internal duel between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, separated in the standings by only 16 points. When asked about a possible clash between the two, Norris sidestepped with a laconic "we'll only find out by living," but Zak Brown clarified the team's position: there will be no hierarchy or team orders. Speaking to the Daily Mail, the chief executive officer reiterated that the two drivers deeply respect each other and that even if a direct confrontation on the track were to arise, there will be no interventions from above, except for one exception. If one of the two should be mathematically out of the game 5 races from the end. But according to Brown, this scenario is unlikely. The hope is that both remain in the fight until the last race, with the title to be decided on the track and not at the pit wall. Ferrari triumphed at the 6 Hours of Spa in the World Endurance Championship World Championship with a dominant performance, signing an impressive 1-2 in the hypercar category. The number 51 car, driven by Pierguidi, Collado and Giovinazzi, crossed the finish line first, ahead of the twin number 50 with Nielsen, Molina and Fuoco. For the red team, this is the 3rd consecutive victory, a streak that began in Qatar and continued with the home victory at Imola. The key moment came in the final part of the race, when Pierguidi consolidated the lead with a flawless final stint, also taking full advantage of a very quick pit stop. After Spa, the drivers' standings see Pierguidi, Collado and Giovinazzi leading with 75 points, followed by Fuoco, Molina and Nielsen at
57. Despite
the withdrawal, Kubica and his team remain 3rd with 39 points ahead of the Toyota crew.
8 among
the constructors, 136 points against Mercedes 107 points, Toyota 71 and BMW 64. The GT3 win brings car number 21 closer to the leading Corvette number 33, which didn't score points in this race. If you liked the video, hit like, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss the next ones. Write what you think in the comments and see you next time.